Welcome to 12 Gauge Investigative.
In the shadows where the truth hides deep, echoes of the lost and the secrets they keep. Cold cases burn in the back of your mind. We dig through the dark, one, two at a time. This ain't fiction, this is blood, this is truth. 12 Gauge investigative, justice uncaged. We ask the questions they're too scared to say, shining a light where the guilty pray. From killers to whispers, we won't look away.
November 13th, 2022. In a quiet college town tucked into the hills of northern Idaho, 4 students, brutally murdered in the dead of night. No forced entry, no cries for help, and for weeks, no answers. Rising tension in music. What followed was a storm, rumors, Reddit theories, TikTok psychics. But beneath the noise, the evidence began to whisper. A car seen circling the neighborhood, a phone that went dark, a knife sheath left behind with a single trace of DNA, and a name emerged, Brian Koberger, a 28-year-old criminology student, studying the criminal mind while allegedly becoming one. But this case isn't solved by headlines. It's solved by patience, by the convergence of science, data, and motive. This is The Long Game, Idaho 4, and the Path of Evidence. I'm your host, and today, on 12 Gauge Investigative, we're unraveling the timeline, the forensics, and the psychological threads of the most chilling case in recent memory.
All right. How's everybody doing tonight on this Thursday night? You know, I thought about taking the night off, but why would I do that? Why would I do that? It's not necessary. Well, you know, today's been a good day. Didn't have a lot going on at work. Almost complete with my week 10 for my studies. And guess what? Next week, last week, and I will be done. Anyways, there's a lot of people that are curious about this book, curious about how it ends, because I've been reading on it for quite a while now, and I'm ready for it to kind of end myself. So, you know, hopefully we get people to come in here. So let me pull this book up, and then we can get on with the show. Get on with the show. I'm using my old laptop, so you know, if my background kind of fades in and out while I'm moving around, that's why. Let me grab my water over here. Because like I said, you know, reading a book, it kind of makes your throat dry. And here we go. Once Brian Koberger was captured, none of these early suspicions mattered anymore. But they mattered to Showalter. Hoodie Guy was just a college kid when all of this had started. And now there were told millions of social media hits, linking him to the crime. These links and his emotional tie to the victim would never go away. Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk had also endured rumors that they'd been involved in the homicides. Most of the speculation derived from the puzzle of why neither had called the police until almost 8 hours later, after the roommates had been killed. Dylan took the brunt of the harassment, especially after it was learned that she'd heard cries and other unusual sounds and had heard a man say, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." She even said a masked man, good Lord, she had even seen a masked man leaving their home. And then what? She pretended nothing had happened and went back to sleep? She had to have known was the sentiment. She was called a killer by the online mobs. She was called a drug dealer by those who made false claims, and she and her boyfriend were moving product, and that the killings were related foul play. If Dylan had known or even just subconsciously feared what had happened to her roommates, although nothing appeared to have implicated her in that, there are trauma-related reasons for a person to delay reporting violence. It is common to be seized by fear, and psychologists have seen a wide variety of responses to brutal crimes. Famously, an ex-Buffalo University student who found her sorority sister raped and bludgeoned in bed called 911, but only because she thought her roommate was unconscious from the choking on vomit. Only saw liquid, her hair caked on her face, tongue sticking through her teeth. Anna Zabel, now in her 50s, told a Daily Mail reporter, speaking in defense of Dylan Mortensen. Only after paramedics arrived and commented on the bedroom being soaked in blood did Zabel notice it. The psychologist said it was a protective mechanism, but the wall had what looked like red broom marks. While Bethany had gone into hiding from the paparazzi in Reno, Dylan had also been driven underground. When the Daily Mail had surveyed her family residence in Boise before posting a photograph, allegedly of Dylan walking to the Starbucks, alongside the caption, "The University of Idaho sophomore was wearing shorts in chilly weather and had her hair pulled back." The photo, blasted across continents, was actually of Dylan's younger sister, a 17-year-old minor. That hadn't sat well with the girl's father, Brent Mortensen. "I'm a pretty big guy," he says, nodding to the physicality he could have used on photographers if he'd been a different type of person. Dylan was his firstborn daughter, and she was getting dragged through social media and the tabloids. All the shit they've said about her. He was obviously hurting, and his daughter, like the Showalters, has pulled the drape closed. Chapter 58. Among the reasons social media skeptics have been manufacturing speculation that Dylan and Bethany were involved in the King Road homicides was an unusual unfolding of events on the morning of November 13th. Upon discovering the murders, either Dylan or Bethany or both had reportedly summoned sorority and fraternity associates of the victim to the residence before anyone called 911. Several friends came over, Hunter Johnson included. Eventually, it was apparently Hunter who called 911 and reported one or more homicides, although the 911 terminology of unconscious person was the placeholder phrasing the Moscow Police Department used until death was confirmed. The police reportedly arrived to a small gathering of students outside the house, all of them visibly upset. And this is interesting because I remember at the very beginning when that rumor was going around that there was people huddled up in front of the home when the police arrived there, and one just looked at the police officer and mumbled the phrase, "dead." The police, I already read that. It wasn't unreasonable for online sleuths to wonder how long the victim friends from the Greek system had been at the residence before Hunter called the police, and whether or not anything else had transpired in that time frame. Had the students accidentally interfered with evidence, intentionally cleaned up the scene, or mischievously gotten their story straight, if only to cover for something unrelated to the murders? The Moscow Police Department reportedly had those same questions, which, following standard policy, were asked of the surviving victims behind closed doors. And that's something that people need to understand is you don't think the police department asked these questions that people have been asking? What took you so long to call 911? Did you clean anything up? Did you move anything? Did you mess with any of the crime scene? Were you in any of the rooms? Did you touch any of the victims? Those are standard, right? The general public wouldn't get answers until a suspect was brought to trial, even then. They hadn't stopped the media from trying to uncover those answers, and others, of course. Reporters had seemingly unending questions for the victim's friends, and if they couldn't be reached, their collegiate hangouts and places of employment were visited. The Mad Greek and the Corner Club received the most inquiries, with journalists dragging camera crews inside or waiting on sidewalk for inbound customers. At the Corner Club, the doorman had to continually throw out members of the press for bothering their clientele with questions about how drunk Maddie and Kaylee had been on the night of their murders, how devious they believed either Jack DeCoeur or Jack Showalter might be, how close Adam the bartender might have been with one of the girls. Sometimes the new visitors to local watering holes seemed of more depraved or possibly heartbroken variety than traditional media members. They snapped selfies in front of the Mad Greeks, cinched drapes, shot video from their cell phones while driving by, or just stared blankly at the front door as if looking at a ghost. In front of the murder house, as it continued to be called, some who'd traveled miles reportedly filmed TikTok dances for their followers. Things had clearly gotten out of hand. But amid all the craziness surrounding the mystery of the King Road homicides, a secondary mystery unfolded online. In the University of Idaho Murders Case Discussion Facebook group, a user named Papa Roger had been commenting on intimate details of the case, some of which seemingly eerily insightful. This was long before a suspect had been found and before any details of the crime scene were released to the public. Papa Roger's avatar, a computer-generated photo he chose to represent himself, looked shockingly similar, in retrospect, to Brian Kohberger, but Papa Roger had been posting his theories and questions about the murders long before Kohberger was a known suspect. On November 30th, he posted, "Of the evidence released, the murder weapon has been consistent as a large fixed-blade knife. This leads me to believe they found the sheath." Police had said they were seeking the public's help in searching for that style of weapon, but they had not said why. Not until Kohberger was arrested did the public learn of the K-bar knife sheath that had been left at the scene. At one point, according to Newsweek, Papa Roger began to argue about the murders with another Facebook user who asked, "Why do you communicate like a serial killer?" The creep factor that Brian Kohberger had reportedly been known for was also apparent in Papa Roger, who was later removed from the Facebook group by its administrators. When questioned months later about whether Kohberger might have been Papa Roger, one of the Facebook group's admins said that whoever it was on here and argued incessantly with people and said some really creepy stuff and posted similar questions to Brian's crime questions, meaning Kohberger's Reddit survey of criminals in conjunction with his graduate work. She added that coincidentally, we removed Papa Roger at 7:10. the evening before Brian's arrest. He created a group page and had 6 people in it. No one has heard from Papa Roger since the arrest. And simultaneously on Reddit, a user who called himself Inside Looking had been posting in the Moscow murders thread. His profile photo was that of a masked man, dressed in black like the intruder Dylan Mortensen had privately described to police. In a post, Inside Looking wrote that the killer parked behind the house, approached property through tree line, entered sliding doors, and left it open, committed murders, and exited the sliding door. After Koberger's arrest, retired FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer spoke to major TV networks about her belief that Papa Roger had indeed been Koberger, and that the name had perhaps been borrowed from a 2014 misogynist incel hero named Elliot Roger, who killed 6 people in a stabbing and shooting spree that included an attack on an Alpha Phi sorority house in California. All 6 victims were college students. It did not seem a coincidence that among the items seized from Koberger's home in Pennsylvania, according to the evidence log, was a book with the underlying on page 118. Elliot Roger had written a manifesto that described his loneliness and inability to connect with women. On page 118 of the manifesto were the lines, "Women must be punished for their crimes of rejecting such a magnificent gentleman as myself. All of those popular boys must be punished for enjoying heavenly lives and having sex with all the girls while I had to suffer." Well, let me stop right quick and ask you, chat, do you believe that page 118 could have been Elliot Rodgers' manifesto? Because I've read that manifesto all the way through, and it's pretty detailed by Elliot. It really is. I don't remember. I mean, I was reading it so earnestly that I wasn't trying to memorize every word, but it is quite interesting that if that was the 118 page that he had underlined, he could have been once again mimicking somebody else and their belief system regarding how he felt about himself. I mean, it could be possible, right? We don't always present our own theories and beliefs and actions to the world. Sometimes we copy other people. And that's been known for a long time. It's not something that is brand new. These killers all seem to have similar beliefs. They seem to have the same morals. They seem to have the same kind of inability to function in the world just like other people. So they copy one another. And it's interesting to know that by copying one another, they're really not being original at all, even though they're trying to be these individuals that are forever linked in history to these awful events. Hey, Texas. I hope that you got your electricity back on. Hey, Joseph, how you doing, buddy? Rondi Potter. So it says, once again, I'm going to say it, women must be punished for their crimes of rejecting such a magnificent gentleman as myself. All of those popular boys must be punished for enjoying heavenly lives and having sex with all the girls while I had to suffer. Discussing similarity between the two men, Coffindaffer told podcaster Tyler Feller it's a view of rejection throughout their whole lives that they had to really endure. And I say endure because that's how I believe it felt to Elliot and possibly to Brian as well. Some question whether the real murderer could be bold enough to get on social media forums that followed his crimes. Coffindaffer responded on Twitter. He drove his own car, carried his own phone, and didn't clip in the sheets tight enough. So I do believe he could leave a digital trail. He was a hot mess. Intelligence with no common sense equals a criminal bound to get caught. So since I'm asking questions tonight, do you believe that because do you believe that he made a lot of mistakes? Do you believe that it was a messy murder based on no evidence, but yet everything else that he did seemed to scream out, "It's me, it's me, it's me." In that aspect, it really amazes me that people believe that he was so perfect in committing this crime. Because once we look at the evidence, it's not perfect at all. There's a lot of mistakes, a lot of little bitty tidbits that he forgot to tighten up, so to speak. And the BTK killer, whom Koberger had studied at DeSales under Catherine Ramsland, had behaved similar, taunting the police through letters written in his local news agencies. The possibility that Papa Roger and the inside looking were Brian Koberger in digital disguise had become more interesting to audiences than yet another photo of the corner club bar. Chapter 59. Michael and Marianne Koberger had had a rough go of things over the years. In their 2010 bankruptcy document, they listed their savings account as holding only $49.77. Their checking account with $398, their cash on hand is only $65, and a credit card debt of more than $57,000 across 15 cards. Their income had hardly been enough to raise 3 kids without struggling, and yet the Kobergers had somehow managed, and their children had not gone without a roof over their heads. The oldest daughter, Amanda, had dabbled with acting in her 20s. She landed at least one role in a slasher film. But eventually both she and her younger sister, Melissa, had become mental health therapists, and Brian, of course, had seemed to turn his life around, studiously pursuing his PhD. Things had seemingly fallen into place for the Koberger parents, and yet now their lives had been upended again by the horrific accusations against their son. Brian was being accused of committing a quadruple homicide with a large-bladed knife, of all things, of being a slasher, like in the movie his sister had been associated with. And the method used in the murders was especially disturbing and pointed to a deeper level of brokenness. Anytime somebody commits a murder or assault by choking, stabbing, or making bodily contact, it always speaks to a level of rage. Forensic psychologist Nafidio Barrel told a reporter for Seeker while dissecting a Pittsburgh mass attack that involved a 16-year-old slashing 19 of his fellow high school students. When you're stabbing someone, it's close and in your face. The experience is more visceral and more graphic, more provocative. It speaks to emotionality, whether rage or paranoia. Brian Koberger, who may have been filled with such rage, specifically toward women, had grown up in a home with 3 of them. In the turmoil following Koberger's arrest, the family finances were apparently taking another hit. According to a News Nation report, Amanda and Melissa had lost their job because of their association with their now infamous brother, even though he had yet to go to trial for his alleged crimes. And Michael and Marianne's home was reportedly on the edge of foreclosure. Carrie Rossum, the BTK killer's daughter, experienced similar financial and social hardships after her father was arrested. Most of her immediate family members were unable to work for several months because of the stress or ostracization in the workplace. Her uncle, the BTK's brother, had a good job at Boeing, but was forced into early retirement. And the BTK's mother, Rawson's grandmother, had literally been repeatedly falling from the stress of the media constantly following her. She'd been moved to a nursing home and forced to take different last names for her safety. The only way to understand what the Kobergers might be going through, Rawson told News Nation, was to see them as crime victims themselves. You have to start from that place, she said. But the financial and social stress wasn't the only collateral damage the Kobergers might have been facing. By the month of May, Michael and Marianne were subpoenaed to testify before Monroe County, Pennsylvania investigative grand jury in relation to the disappearance and murder of a woman in a nearby town just months before their son had moved to Pullman. It's interesting that they were subpoenaed to this grand jury, and nothing ever came out of it. I mean, not that we heard. Nothing ever was released that I understand or remember. If it had, I just don't know about it. It had been 1 year since 45-year-old Dana Smithers was last seen leaving her neighbor's house on foot at approximately 11 p.m. in the borough of Stroudsburg, 40 miles away from the Koberger home, on May 28, 2022. Her phone, purse, car keys, and medications were found in her own residence a few houses down, leading investigators to surmise that Smithers had made it home before meeting with probable violence. Nobody really knew what had happened to her, though, until on April 27th of the following year, while Brian Koberger was in jail on suspicion of committing the King Road homicide. Decomposed human remains were found in a wooded area of Stroudsburg and positively identified as belonging to Smithers. Almost immediately after Koberger's parents were subpoenaed to testify before the grand jury, the public had questions. Mainly, why had leading investigators to surmise that Smithers had made... Oh, good grief. Why had they been brought in? It seemed logical to assume that Brian Koberger was suspected of being involved in Dana Smithers' murder, and that Michael and Marianne were perhaps his alibi, or lack thereof. But the Stroud Area Regional Police Department speedily issued a formal statement contradicting any ideas about Brian Koberger's association with the Smithers murder. The SARPD has no evidence that Dana Smithers' disappearance is in any way tied to the Idaho murder suspect, Brian Koberger. Read the official press release from Jennifer Lyon, Chief of Police. So there's my answer right there, right? More speculation arose after that. Since there was no alleged connection, perhaps Koberger's parents had been compelled to testify as a mere ruse to conform Brian's alibi, or something similar, and in doing so, perhaps provide other useful information about their son during the course of the proceeding. Pennsylvania law allowed otherwise sealed grand jury testimony to be shared between police departments. In this case, the Moscow PD could review Michael and Marianne's sealed testimony months ahead of Brian Koberger's trial. Koberger's parents hired an attorney who'd unsuccessfully attempted to quash the Monroe County subpoena, an additional hit to their budget. The financial burden of visiting their son in the Latah County Jail, all the way across the county in Idaho, must have seemed out of the question. They had reportedly not seen him since his arrest, but had talked to him on the phone. He knows absolutely no one, Marianne had said on Reddit, in the days before Koberger loaded his belongings and filled up on gas to start his PhD program, and we have no family there. I worry about him being lonely. Now for Marianne or Michael to see their son again in the near future seemed unlikely. Chapter 60. Another grand jury had recently convened in Idaho. Its purpose was to determine whether or not sufficient evidence existed to indict, meaning officially charge, Brian Koberger with the King Road homicides and bring him to trial. This was confusing to some followers of the case on social media, since Koberger had already languished in jail under the presumption of his likely guilt, an ironic contrast to the presumption of innocence the accused are judicially afforded. The grand jury elected to indict, and Koberger was soon brought to an arraignment, where by law he was to either plead guilty, not guilty, or stand silent, in which case the judge would enter a not guilty plea on his behalf. Sometimes the defendant would stand silent in rebellion against their attorney or the courts. Other times as a tactic, such as ensuring he would not be on the record as saying not guilty, which might cause undue hostility from jurors who might later decide his fate. An inquisitive public had not seen Koberger since his initial court appearances over 4 months ago. Now he wore the same prisoner garb over what appeared to be a concealed bulletproof vest filling out his torso. Koberger looked stern, his skin the pale color of someone kept exclusively indoors for several months. His shackled feet shuffled as he entered the courtroom. He sat heavily beside Ann Taylor, his primary public defender, and did not look behind him. If he had, he would have seen what might have been dozens of family members of the victims. Steve and Christy Gonsalves were there, along with their daughter, Olivia, and her newborn baby. Olivia sat in the gallery just feet from Koberger and gently bounced her baby in a harness across her chest. Steve Gonsalves had his eyes locked on Koberger, glaring. Koberger was again read the charges he faced, including the 4 counts of premeditated homicide, along with 1 additional charge of burglary. Koberger nodded his head in understanding that the case's new judge, a University of Idaho law student graduate, John C. Judge, read the charges against them. With each question asked of him, Koberger leaned forward and spoke firmly into the microphone at his table. "Yes, I do," he said, when asked if he understood his rights. "No," he said rigidly, when asked if he had any questions. He clenched his jaw, glanced briefly at his attorney. Judge spoke in a somber monotone. "If you are found guilty or plead guilty on each charge, you could be facing 10 years in prison, followed by 4 consecutive life sentences or the death penalty." When it was time for Koberger's plea to be entered, Ann Taylor stood from her seat. "Your Honor, we will be standing silent," she said. The BTK killer, whom Koberger had studied at DeSales, had initially done the same. The judge entered not guilty pleas on Koberger's behalf. A trial was set for October 2nd, and Koberger was walked out of the courtroom by armed sheriff deputies. So, October 2nd, so many years ago, and here we are, still with continuances being filed. Such a lifetime ago, it seems. Despite the sweeping gag order in place to prevent the families of the victims from talking about the case to the media, Gonsalves spoke with a reporter after the arraignment. He had a new goatee and looked tougher somehow than he had a few months earlier. He said that his primary emotion in the courtroom had been rage. Then he had shifted to a more productive mindset, he said, reminding himself to pay better attention to the proceeding, to take notes, to memorize, to understand, not just suffer through the anger he'd felt building up. His family needed him to be more strategic than that. Justice doesn't fall out of the sky, he said. Sometimes you gotta earn it. Then he added, speaking about his daughter and her friends, "We're looking for somebody to pay the price for what he did to them. It's not one person, it's 4. 4 individuals that were doing everything they could possibly do to better their lives. They just went to bed one night and some monster snuck into their home and killed them." His eyes staring into the camera were as dark as anvils. Gonsalves also spoke with CNN, reminding the world that he wanted the death penalty for Brian Koberger. He hoped that would send a message to potential murderers in the state of Idaho. Unfortunately, a lot of bad things happen across America, Gonsalves said, but we moved here and other people moved here for the safety that we have. We have to make sure that the world knows that you can't come to Idaho. You can't hunt our children down, and you can't kill them in their beds and just be given, a room to stay. Koberger's silence when it came to entering his plea had surely irked the families of the victims. By all appearances, they believed in his guilt. None had come out to say otherwise, and now with a seeming mountain of at least circumstantial evidence and a reported DNA match, Brian Koberger's only response had been the absence of one. He had nodded his head. He had clenched his jaw. He had said yes to the judge. But to the charges against them, only silence echoed. For 6 months now, there had been other silences, ones that were understandable, even reverent. Beyond the yellow crime scene tape with the word "Do Not Cross" draping the perimeter of the property at King Road, strangers continued to come by. The hundred to quietly pay their respects. Some had out-of-state license plate on their vehicles, having journeyed from afar. Others were U of I students, traipsing up the hill with their backpack clenched tight. They stared, said nothing, sometimes dropped flowers at the makeshift memorial that had sprung up in front of the house. At the U of I vigil on campus, there was that silent sea of faces staring up at Ben Mogan while he spoke about his Maddie. His hands had nervously jiggled in the pockets of a suit that seemed uncomfortable against his skin. There were silences as he paused to catch his breath. Maddie's mother and stepfather, Karen and Scott Laramie, had walked silently into the hole in their lives left by their daughter's absence. They made fewer and fewer public statements, seemingly adrift in their pain. Jeff Kernodle had stopped answering his phone. It had been ringing with media requests for him to talk about Xana, and it hadn't gone silent. Only Jeff had. The ache of losing his daughter may be too strong to put into words. It was a silence he had earned. Xana's mother, of course, must have been enduring the silence that came with knowing how much he had missed, those hours that don't come back. And in the sunrise that Jim and Stacy Chapin watched some morning together with their coffees, there were likely yellow and white streaks across the sky that reminded them of their boy. The air came all the way across the field to touch them, as if carrying Ethan on its wings. In those small moments of silence where life was remembered as precious, there may have been hope. The epilogue. By mid-spring, flowers had bloomed along the edges of 1122 King Road. A sky blue security shed, the size of a small snow cone shack, had been wheeled onto the property atop a utility trailer and had now replaced the police-style vehicle that had been guarding the house from looky-loos for months. The shack had a small air conditioning unit, a light gray cinder block pushed against the wheels of his trailer to keep it from rolling downhill. The on-site security guard with it. The property had been donated by its owner to the University of Idaho, whose administrators planned to tear down the boarded-up house within a year. There was talk of building a small memorial on the location, and also talk of simply leaving the property bare, perhaps seeded with grass that would thicken over time. Whatever would become of the spot, there was a sense of urgency related to starting over in whatever ways possible. Perhaps the teardown would happen after Brian Koberger's trial. Some speculated jurors should have the opportunity to review the crime scene in person. Administrators from the university were tight-lipped about a specific date for the structure's demolition, but it said they wanted it removed before the coming fall semester. Nobody doubted that the house would eventually be destroyed, but not from the collective memory of those who'd been touched by the crime that had occurred inside it. Judging by media traffic related to the King Road case, the numbers affected were in the millions. The temperature in Moscow on May 14, 2023, one day of spring commencement, was a perfect 79 degrees. The sun shone through a clear blue sky, and a light breeze carried the scent of blossoms from the university's many gardens and from the purple lilacs that would soon be humming with bees. At 9 a.m., ceremony inside the university's 100-foot tall Kibbe Dome arena, Maddie Mogan was posthumously awarded her business degree. She would have graduated on this day if she had lived to do so. In front of a crowd of thousands, filling the arena seats in ground level rows, elbow to elbow, students dressed in black, graduation regalia, her mother and stepfather walked on stage to accept a copy of her bound and embossed diploma book. Her stepfather took tenuous breaths, and Maddie's mother held tightly to his arm. They shook hands with the president of the university, and Maddie's mother smiled with pride, blinking back tears. The couple was followed by Maddie's father, who accepted an identical copy. At a subsequent 2 p.m. ceremony on the same day, again in the front of thousands, Kelly's 4 siblings walked on stage to accept a diploma book on her behalf. Kelly had been scheduled to graduate with her degree in general studies just weeks after the murders. Now her 3 sisters were dressed in church clothes, and her brother in shorts and a ball cap. Just an Idaho boy, after all, to bring home a symbol of Kaylee's hard work for the mantle. Her sister Olivia, as Maddie's mother had done earlier, smiled proudly through fluttering eyelashes. It came as a surprise to most in attendance that an additional posthumous degree in sociology and criminology was awarded that day. It was given to the family of a young woman named Lupita Reese. 5 adults and a toddler took the stage on Lupita's behalf. They stood solemnly, the toddler asleep against the chest of one of the men. Another of the men held a poster-sized photograph of Lupita in a frame. The young woman had died at 21 of injuries inflicted in a car crash. Death had not come only to the families of King Road victims that year. The reminder seemed to settle heavily across the thousands of faces in attendance. Life is fragile, and it doesn't take a murderer to cut one time short. After the ceremony, which lasted just under 2 hours, graduates poured through the exits of the Kibbe Dome, with the tassels of the graduation caps having been flipped from one side to the other, that well-known symbol of beginning a new chapter in life. Outside, the campus grounds had mostly been emptied of students, but it wasn't the kind of emptiness that was felt during the many weeks before a suspect was arrested. Now the walkways were lined with flowers and effervescent with the energy of living things that clicked and buzzed from the grass. By then, Kaylee and Jack's golden doodle, Murphy, had his own Instagram page, curated by Jack DeCoeur, and with more than 100,000 followers. Murphy posted mostly selfies, with comments like, "This is a throwback photo of me. My mom loved this one." He was a puppy in early photos, fully grown later. And the city of Moscow had its own surfeit of new followers now, but it didn't much seem to care, or necessarily need them. It was hard to be known for something horrible, when what it was built on had been something great. The smell of ponderosa from the nearby mountains drifted the valley now, and the weather was warm again, and a rush of clean air coursed through the heart of downtown, where customers of the popular organic food co-op and hipster gym rats mingled continually with old-school Idahoans born to Moscow back when most of the coffee was still drunk black. Across the sprawling green field on campus, 2 groups of students, mostly young men, played a pickup rugby game on this warm graduation day. It was shirts against skins, and half of them had thrown their t-shirts toward the edges of the freshly mowed grass. They ran up and down the field laughing in the sunlight. One of them jogged to his girlfriend on the sidelines and kissed her, then lifted her into the air, not without struggling. They fell in a heap together. There was a steady but slow stream of traffic heading out of town. It sounded like water flowing. Across the field, three young women wordlessly bumped the volleyball between them with almost perfect form, country music playing from a Bluetooth speaker lying in the grass beside one of their backpacks, and a knocked over clear water bottle that caught the sunlight and refracted it. Life, that's what was happening, and nobody would take that for granted again. And that is the end. That is the end of While Idaho Slept. Let me see who's in here. I'm not trying to neglect y'all whatsoever. It's just hard to read and answer the chats at the same time. This comment states, I do not think Brian and Elliot are similar except being rejected and angry. Brian much brighter and driven for some reason different than Elliot. Vigil, snow, and high self-awareness. I wish all family can move far away to Europe. Perhaps their lives are ruined. Kind of a lifetime hurt. So sad. It was a good book, wasn't it? You know, it's interesting to me to think on what I just read. How much information we actually had laying in our laps, so to speak. And nobody that I know of read the book. They all were reading Blum's book. They didn't read this one that I ever heard of, which is quite interesting to me. This book was indeed a good one. You know, I was thinking today, obviously I was posting a lot of shorts because I subscribed to a new short maker, obviously. And I was thinking on some of the stuff, especially the video that I have on my page. And if y'all haven't been to my page in a while, I want you to check out that video that I have that's playing once you get to my page. And some of the stuff that I was saying in that video, it just kept me mesmerized a little bit. I'm going to play a little bit of it to you. Because some of it that I'm talking about, it just really, let me see if I can get to it now. Of course, I can get to it. It's not a big deal. Because I know exactly which one it is. And I know exactly what the thumbnail looks like. I found it. Let's listen to what 12 has to say, because this video is quite, I don't know if y'all have actually listened to it or you were hearing the live when I actually did it. But it actually took me back a little bit on some of the stuff that I was saying. Hey, Nina. Hi, PKC. And if you didn't see my my post on my community page, I want to let you guys know that I started a podcast on Spotify. So if you have Spotify, you might go over there and listen to some of the either older stuff or some of the newer stuff if you don't get to listen to it the night of the presentation. The link is on my page, and it is where you usually find the email address and stuff. It's usually in that area. So hopefully some of y'all will go over there and subscribe to that channel. I am also on X now. So if y'all go over there, it's the same Name 12 gauge investigative. So let's listen to what I have to say a little bit on this. Oh, wow. That'll work, I guess. Hold on. There are fields, and they start repeating stuff that they don't know anything about. But it's cool. Let's see what the damn document's got to say. I mean, I know people were up in their feels about it. The argument is this court has an obligation to uphold Mr. Koberger's constitutional rights by vacating the trial date because the defense counsel needs additional time to review discovery and prepare for the complex merits and sentencing phase unique to death penalty cases. So let me ask you, chat. You remember way back when the discovery motions were being put out there, discovery motion number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. And y'all can feel free to answer me. I mean, even though that is the past me, that's not a recent me, but listen to what I got to say. I'm really long winded on this one. Number 6, number 7, number 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, all the way to 21 or something, I guess it got to. So remember when they had a deadline to have all that discovery in there? Well, what has Ann Taylor been doing with this time frame? What's she been doing? That's what I want to know. What's she been doing? You know what's pretty cool is you can go full screen on this, and I can still see y'all's chat. Maybe that's what I need to do, is just go full screen and be able to see y'all's chat. Oh, 12 gauge. I'll try to do the old school thing. So I ask you guys, what has Ann Taylor been doing all this time? Can y'all answer me that? Do y'all have any thoughts on that? Do you believe that she's been representing Mr. Koberger the best of her ability? Do you believe that she's been doing what she needs to do effectively to represent her client? Do you believe that she is actually capable of convincing a jury that her client is indeed not culpable of this crime that he's been committed of or accused of? I know I asked y'all a bunch of questions just then, so answer at your leisure, but I believe that she's not capable. I really do. I mean, a lot of people have stated that she's a good attorney, that she's gonna come out on top, those type of things. But I don't believe that she's that good of an attorney. Yeah, I agree with you. Not by taking on another death penalty case. I mean, like I said the other day, that other death penalty case could be in motion before this one. And this one's been in the works for 2.5 years? But it seems like stalling seems to be something that defense attorneys are good at, because obviously it gives them time to really work on their client's defense. But you heard that document that I'm reading right now, and she was in that document talking about not having enough time, not having enough ability to get through all the discovery. Chat, do you really believe that she needs more time? Do you believe that Judge Hippler is going to grant a continuance? Do you believe that? Let's see what Rondi has to say. Yeah, that wouldn't make you feel very, very important, would it? It wouldn't. It would make you feel like, okay, what's my attorney doing? Why aren't they taking all the time they need to work on this case instead of working on another case, right? I just don't have much faith in the defense, not because it's Ann Taylor, not because it's Massoff, not because it's Bicca Barlow. I just don't have a lot of confidence in them, even though I believe the man could possibly be guilty. I believe that, their incompetence screams the possibility of a technicality. And that's what I'm worried about is, their inability to do their job could get a technicality. And that's interesting to think about. You know what I mean? I think she is stretched thin between two cases. A lot of people think she is so good and that she's going to bring it during the trial. I don't think she has anything to bring. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think she needs to take help in getting the case moving along. And that's one thing that she has not done. She has not asked for assistance by the resource officer, where they could be helping during all this. But she's been wanting to do it alone, so to speak. Remember that Prozac or prosecution fought releasing discovery early on, causing a big slowdown for defense. Yeah, I do remember that. And like I said, it's not all her fault. But once the discovery deadline came and went and she was given all that discovery, I mean, at this point, she has it. You get what I'm saying? Like, she had the discovery. There's no reason why she should be in the position that she is. I mean, Judge told her to get more help, didn't he? I believe he did. I believe he did. I believe he was saying on the last hearing, or even before that one, because that was the preliminary, he was saying, well, you haven't ever mentioned that you needed help. You haven't ever mentioned that things were not going to be on time. And here we are. And here we are. Let me play a little more of this. I know that she's taking on another death penalty case, but do you believe that she's actually been utilizing her time effectively, trying to get all this stuff, or do you think she's been putting more energy in trying to stall than actually understanding the evidence or the paperwork? What do y'all think? What up, Leslie and Billy? PKC. She is too busy focusing on the death penalty instead of the trial. Haven't they been asking for continued? So let me ask you about that scenario, or that. I like that comment, Joe. You said Anne has a lot of help. There are terabytes to sort for the defense. You're right. So what's y'all's impression of, do you believe that she's working harder to remove the death penalty, or do you believe that she's working hard on getting this case to trial? What's y'all's belief system on that? What do y'all believe? Do you think she's actually working hard to get this case to trial, or do you think she's been working harder on getting the death penalty removed? Tell me what you think. Because to me, I believe that in the beginning, it seemed like she was more apt in trying to get the death penalty removed, right? And that makes a lot of sense because you want to save your client's life. When it's all said and done, you want to save that client of yours' life. You want to make sure that, they don't go and get the firing squad or whatever await them. But as I was reading today, I think it was, or maybe yesterday, do y'all remember when they went to the Supreme Court to try to get the death penalty removed? Y'all remember that? And the Supreme Court did not remove it. They didn't go for it. And that's why in this video, I believe that I talk about aggravators and everything, because it's important to know that certain death penalty cases are there for a specific reason. It's not just a generalized murder one case. You know what I mean? I think she knows that it is a case she isn't going to win, and she wants to save him from the death penalty. I like that statement. I really do. Continuances from jump. Yes. I don't know what she's been doing. I mean, because as we were told, and I don't know how true this is, but she likes to do her own type stuff. So it's like people were saying, well, why didn't she get like paralegals and stuff to go through all that? Generally, that's what people do, right? They get assistance, paralegals to help them out, and obviously she hasn't done that. This court has an obligation to enforce the constitutional rights of all persons, including prisoners. And I like your statement there. I like your statement. It is a death penalty case, so she should leave no stone unturned. You're right. You're right on that 150%. She should go above and beyond. But at a particular point, how much is too much? You know what I mean? Like that continuance that they asked for the other day. How much is too much? How long is too long? Like it was saying the other day about the family members having the right as well to have this case brought to trial. How long is too long? That's my question. If you were one of the victims' families, would you be okay with the continuance, or would you be upset at this point that the case is still trying to stall? Tell me what you think. Tell me what you feel. Tell me what you believe. Because in reality, if it was my family, there's no way 2.5 years later I would be okay with the speed of the trial impending. Like I would be asking myself, like, man, are we ever going to go to trial? Are we ever going to get to see what actually happened? Exactly. Yeah, and I don't claim to know what the defense is doing. It just appears by the document that they're trying to do or go a certain way, and you're right on that. He's still going to say at some point that he had incompetent representation. Like I said before, I think the leak of info gives her the chance to try and take advantage of the situation. I can understand both sides, but this has to go to trial. I agree with y'all wholeheartedly. Wholeheartedly. It does need to go to trial. It does need eventually to manifest justice in however means possible. Because to be honest, you have to understand the evidence that you have. Because the prosecution had the same evidence. They've seen the same discovery that they've given you. So in you preparing your defense for that, you have to know that everything that you're preparing with, the prosecution has seen the same thing. So in that aspect, I believe that they're trying to make sure that there's not any Brady violations, that there's not any kind of material that are missing that could lead to some kind of technicality. I believe that if anything, the stalling is being misinterpreted as her not wanting to go to trial. As I was saying earlier, I would say that she's possibly wanting to make sure that there's nothing in that discovery that could set her client free or even set up an appeal later on. I would be upset with all the delays, but in compromise to the high-profile M trials, it has really been a long time. Daybell's was 19, KR was 122. I would be upset if they changed it. The families have scheduled time off from work, secured places to stay, but most of all, they need closure. If AT isn't ready now, she probably won't ever be. I think Adelson was 2012. Agreed, she would have filed those motions either way. And that is true, that those families have scheduled time off. They have, tried to get rentals. They've tried to have a schedule of when and where they're going to do, because where they're going to, come to the court, who's coming, who's not coming, who's going to be working. Kind of like what Steve said in one of the interviews. He stated that they were probably going to go around the, make shifts of it. That way there was always somebody there representing the family. And I understand that. But if it gets continued again, I mean, how much continuance could she be asking for? I believe that she's trying to take advantage of the leak. And let me ask you another question since we're talking about that. I just heard today, everybody's been texting me and sending me messages and stuff. I just heard that there's another one coming out in July 11th, I believe, called A Night in Idaho. And it's going to be on Prime Video. I mean, I just wonder how many of these docuseries we have to sit through before we actually see what's real and what's not. Because to me, sitting through a docuseries, I mean, the Dateline episode was one of the ones that was really interesting to me because it had a lot of information that we'd never seen or heard before. But this one, it's 4 episodes, like you said. And the James Patterson book is coming out as well. So at a particular point, they're worried about publicity. They're worried about how much more media, what would the word be? Potential tainting of the jury. How much more media has the capability to write a script against the defendant. You know what I mean? But just like everything else, if your attorney is good at doing what they do, if the experts support the evidence or the storyline that your attorney is making, it doesn't matter what kind of jurors you have up there, you're going to be able to convince them. They could have seen and heard all this stuff all along and be able to blink it out of their head enough to be fair. And that is what we all want. We want a fair trial. We want justice to be served, not on a technicality. We want it to be legitimate, and we want it to be done swiftly. Whatever my thoughts and feelings are should never override the judicial process and the procedure to go along with how court trials are handled. Because I think that's what people get so caught up in, is people's own beliefs about certain situations. They tend to think that that's what they believe about the judicial process. No, I believe the judicial process should be as fair as possible. Is it corrupt in some areas? I'm pretty sure there's been cases where it hasn't ran the smoothest, but it's the best that we have at this point. So what are we going to do? Throw it away and let what replace it? You know what I mean? It's been in place all this time. What are we going to throw it away and replace it with? If this gets delayed, it will probably be spring 2026. AT's other trial is 2026. Holidays will probably prevent this one from going before it. I believe you're probably right. I was going to drop my Prime subscription. Now we'll have to wait. Now what? They will charge extra to watch. Yeah, I had totally deleted the app off my phone. So I was like, I know I have a Prime membership. Why isn't it on my phone? And then I had to go and I had uninstalled it because I really don't watch Prime that much. You know, they say our judicial system is the best and fairest in the world. I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But, to hear other people talk, it's almost like it's not. You know what I mean? It's not perfect, but it's the best justice system in existence. You're right. I mean, there's no such thing as perfection. We're not going to get perfect police officers, perfect judges, perfect lawyers, but they work hard at what they do and they should be recognized for that instead of torn down as if nobody knows what they're doing. You get what I'm saying? I mean, that's what I believe in. Let's listen to a little more what 12 Gauge has to say.
Brown versus Plata. And we also see Raw versus Conley. Upon the state courts, equally with the courts of the Union, rests the obligation to guard, enforce, and protect every right granted to secured by the Constitution of the United States and the laws made in pursuant thereof. I don't have any problems with people having rights and, the constitutional foundation that our forefathers had so many years ago. Hey, we all need them. We all live by them. My problem is when you tried to stall, and this isn't the only case that I've heard of. The one that I was going to do tonight was out of Texas, and this individual spent 14 years on death row.
And you're right about that. But as we've heard as well, how much possible leakage, like honestly, that Dateline episode, and to be fair, okay, let's be fair on both sides. I'm not one-sided on this question to you, Joseph. But let's be fair. All the stuff that they leaked in that Dateline episode, was there anything other than probably a little bit of the segment that we didn't already know? I mean, because we kind of knew that there were images on a cell phone. We just didn't know what they were about. We knew about the pool party. We knew about the multiple times coming around Queen Road apartments. We just didn't know about the visualization of it. We knew about, we didn't know about the selfies in the phone. We did know about him watching YouTube that over 60 times about the crimes. We did know about him watching the Bundy stuff, the Son of Sam stuff. We didn't know a lot of that, okay? But is there anything, and be honest with yourself, okay, when I ask this, is there anything in that Dateline episode that could be used against him to put culpability of him being a murderer? Was there anything in that Dateline episode that really could show that he was either in the house? Did they show any knife that they found on a cell phone? Did they show anything that would have placed them in that home? Because we already have questions about the Elantra. We've had questions about the Elantra forever, okay? But also we have to understand that Dateline episode did not really show anything that is going to be able to be presented as solid evidence to put this man in the home. They have to have other stuff to back that evidence up. If anything, the evidence that they showed in that video would be circumstantial. And if it gets tossed, then it gets tossed. But what really him watching a particular porn is going to be implicating enough for him to commit this crime, especially if you don't present it in the context that particular porn could have led to his fascination or fantasy of one of the victims. You have to present it in a light like that. But if they don't do that, then it just, okay, well, he liked a particular porn. Doesn't mean that I'm changing my stance, okay? I'm trying to just be fair right now. I'm trying to be objective because that Dateline episode really didn't do it much damage other than it went against the gag order. Or did it? The biggest issue with what was publicized in Dateline that the court cites anyway is that quite a few things are inadmissible. Bundy connection, Bundy selfies, some searches. I think they made a big deal out of the Dateline show when it really wasn't anything earth-shattering. I think if I took anything away from that Dateline episode that really rocked my world a little bit was the 417 sound. That right there, that thud, and then to hear the dog barking, that was the most moving to me. I mean, and they showed a lot of stuff, but it's not without reason. I mean, because in reality, you having women on your cell phone, if you're a male of 28 and you're of, in your prime, that's not really odd unless one of the victims is in your cell phone. Now, if we find out later on that one of the victims is indeed in those cell phone pictures, then that could be a problem. But they didn't show that in the Dateline episode. They showed friends of the victims. So maybe they gave enough to give the impression of what is to come rather than to say, well, this is what they have. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but, because there's a difference in having photos of friends of the victims and actually having photos of the victims. There's a difference in, searching different porn sites and searching porn sites that actually echoed what the crime scene actually did. So if there's searches that kind of go along with, okay, this person killing somebody while they're sleeping with a knife. Now then you got a little bit, then it's a little bit out of the way there. You know what I mean? The order was ignored. Dateline attempted to sway the public's perception. I do not give many people credit for being critical thinkers. The information leaked was meant to portray BK as a psycho. I believe he's been meant to be portrayed like that since day one. I believe the Dateline did not do anything other than repeat the narrative that's gone on forever since he was arrested. And to be fair, what if, I'm not doing the what if. Could it possibly be in the near future that we find out that this individual does have a lot of mental health problems? Would we be able to accept then that the sayings about him being creepy, about him being a little antisocial, a little, awkward, would we be able to accept those things at that point when we actually do find out that he indeed does have some mental issues? Would we be willing to concede and say, well, yeah, I can see that now that they showed the mental issues that he does possess? Excuse me. It's interesting whenever we're told something and then we don't have the rest of it to back it up. Kind of like what I just said. If we're told or we're shown that this individual indeed does have mental capabilities that cause mental health issues, and we find that out later on, I'll be able to say, okay, I'm good with that. I'm good with that. I'm good knowing that, the dude, all those creepy sightings and all that stuff that people have said over time, I'm good with that. And I've been good with that because that's their perception, not mine. You know what I mean? Yeah, it still doesn't matter per Idaho law. Because in reality, I've been around some creepy people. Brian looks different to me, but he doesn't present himself any darker than dark people that I've been around. And I say that as personality wise. And I've always told people this whenever I'm counseling somebody, you can always look into the windows of their soul through their eyes. You know what I mean? You see somebody's eyes. You actually pay attention to what their eyes are saying. Their mouth could be moving 100 miles an hour, but their eyes are not going to lie to you. They're not. If you really look at somebody, you can tell what type of person they really are. And I know that that doesn't make sense to a lot of people who don't work in the field, but if you work in the field, you understand it because you can see a lot of misinterpretation of an individual based on what the perception is in reality. What people say, well, that person could never murder someone, or that person don't have the capability of doing that. But if you actually see the darkness in their eyes or the lost, the far out look, then you start to wonder, okay, they're talking and they're saying exactly what a normal person's saying, but their eyes are not reflecting with the verbal continuant that is coming from their mouth. Do you get what I'm saying or not? Tell me what you believe I'm talking about. I mean, are y'all understanding that? The photo was so biased. One of him in black hoodie, comparison was made to Bundy. I get that. I get that. But it's their job, is it not, to make people look a certain way when you're a part of the media? Isn't it your job to go one direction or the other? Like, there's so much one-sidedness on YouTube because in reality, for the people to openly come right out and say that they believe the man is guilty, you don't hear that a lot. So I don't know why individuals get so upset whenever people do say that, because most of the people have a general consensus that the man is innocent. They really do. They really do. That is a myth. Our eyes tell us what kind of person is. Not buying it. And I've never used that while counseling. Well, that's fine. That's fine. That's understandable. Understand what you're saying. Tell me why Hitler is so upset with the leak. Give me your interpretation. I don't know the man, so I don't know what would cause him to be so upset with the leak. Tell me what you believe makes him so upset with it, other than it could have been a violation of the gag order. I mean, the man seemed very cut and dry with his rules. You know what I mean? You know, he seemed pretty cut and dry. This is what he expects. This is what he wants. And it seems when people go against that, it doesn't make him happy. At least that's the perception. You know what I mean? So tell me what you think. I mean, the beautiful thing is we're all individuals. And what you use and what you believe makes it a special thing. Because there's no competition in life other than your own competition with yourself. You know, like many people are in competition with other people to be smarter, to be faster, to be this, but they let themselves down every day because they're so worried about what other people believe or think or want them to be that it's easy just to give up on yourself when you don't have to compete with somebody. That competition with yourself is most important. So I'd like to know what kind of counseling you do, Joseph. Are you a psychiatrist, psychologist? Are you a family marital therapist. What kind of counselor are you? I wonder if Brian was trying to look menacing for whatever reason in that picture. Hitler is upset with the leak because he knows bias of jury is likely now. His gag order was ignored on purpose. How can he trust the leaker now? Well, he's put a team together to try to find out exactly who could have been the individual that gave the leak, how much of it was really relevant and how much wasn't. I mean, people, I believe, are putting so much emphasis on this Dateline episode for whatever reason. I'm not happy that the gag order was gone against, but I'm also one of those people that believe the gag order should have never been put in place, especially after the individual was in custody. They should have opened everything up. What makes this case more special than the other cases that are being tried right now that are just as high profile or more? Because you're telling me that Brian Kohberger is more famous, quote unquote, than Sean Diddy Combs? No. But yet, in a federal courtroom, they were able to find jurors to listen to that trial. You get what I'm saying? I believe that the gag order caused more problems than it helped. I could understand it before the individual, before the individual was arraigned and all that other stuff. I get that. But now that it's been so many years after the fact, open it up. Let people see what they've been wanting to see, one way or the other. If they see something they don't like, if they see something they don't understand or comprehend, you can't guard us from the truth. Because all it does is fuel the conspiracy fires. Because it's so easy to put pieces in there that aren't reality versus what is reality. I'm not naive to think public is going to be unbiased after all the info. But you're also putting that on quote unquote everyone. And if you are a therapist, that is an absolute, okay? That is an absolute. You're putting an absolute where everyone is going to be biased. And you know as well as I do that that's not true. There are some people that do not follow YouTube. There's some people that do not follow true crime. There's some people don't even watch Dateline. There's some people that don't even have a clue who Brian Kohberger is, what he's accused of. They may have heard about the case. I can go out and find you 12 people who have no clue about this case. I really can. You know why? Because more people are involved in the struggle in their daily living than being in the struggle of somebody who's suspected of killing 4 people. More people in life are more involved in their own lives than they are in the life of someone they don't know. And unless they're related to these 4 people that got killed, chances are in that area, life goes on. There's so much more happening in the world that people are thinking about rather than Brian Kohberger. And I can almost guarantee that. There's riots going on in LA. There's, all these things happening. There's an individual on the run who killed 3 little girls. I mean, there's a lot of things going on. Not everyone watches the news, reads paper, watches Dateline, or follows any social media. My husband is one. Sometimes he hears things on the radio. The only news he is interested in is the weather. That's true. He would be a perfect juror. I have served on a jury. People were more interested in getting home than being just. And that's the truest statement you've made all night. It really is. It really is. They're more interested in getting home than being sequestered. If this jury is sequestered, then they're going to be mad. And after a while, you get tired of talking with people who don't believe one way or the other. So, what are we supposed to do with that? Unfortunately, none of us can change that. If they deliberate for 30 minutes and find a guilty plea, there's no time frame which the jury can deliberate in order for it to be just or unjust. You get what I'm saying? I mean, I heard of a case where they deliberated for 45 minutes, came back guilty on all charges. So that jury was already had its mind made up before they before they went in there to deliberate. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. But in reality, there are people out there that have never heard of this case. If they heard of it, it came and went until the next one. Daybell was 30 to 60 minutes. Yeah, that was quick, right? That was quick. People are worried about how they're going to feed their families, how high groceries are. Why aren't prices going down? All the promises that have been made and have not followed through on by the president. They're really upset at that. They're more upset with the president than wondering or worrying about whether Brian Koberger is innocent or guilty. A lot of people that get jury summons, they get angry because they don't want to be on a jury. Like you made that statement. They'd rather be home. Every time I get one, I'm like, man, how can I get out of this? How can I get out of this? Because most people don't want to be on a jury. Not because they don't want justice, not because they don't want to do the right thing or their civil duty. They just don't want to be on a jury. It doesn't matter how much they pay per day. So in reality, most people could care less, They want to get out of that responsibility. So when it comes to this trial, I believe that they're going to be able to find 20 jurors to potentially go all the way through to find a verdict. However long that might take. I believe that this Dateline thing will somehow be swept under the carpet until after the trial, and then we're going to find out what the leak was, and they're probably going to have ramifications after the fact. I believe that the continuance is not going to be that big of a deal. If it is, it'll probably be a continuance of 6 weeks or shorter. Yeah, they found a jury for Diddy. And I know everybody knows who P. Diddy is. Look at the Vallow case like you are discussing. The Vallow case. I mean, in that area, I'm sure most people knew about that case. My husband gets mad because I think the county targets him. He served on a jury for a week, got a questionnaire 2 months later, then another 6 months later. Yeah, it's kind of unnerving a little bit. If you're not following news, you're ignorant of what is happening in our culture. It is especially important with how the president is seeking fascism. Dictators count on ignorance. Well, I bet there's a lot of people that don't follow the news. They get their news off YouTube or by watching creators who have a daily news show or whatever. Because we can call them ignorant, or we can call them stupid, or we can call them smart. Whatever the word is that fits them is based on the word that they identify with. But in reality, the more uneducated you are, the easier you are to control. And that's a fact. The more you go along with the status quo, and I'm not talking about this case right now, I'm not talking about anything political. I'm just saying, if you're easily led because other people will believe in it, and you don't do your own research and either stand your ground on what you believe, then it's dangerous for you. It's dangerous for you. But as far as getting back to the jury on this case, I believe they will find a jury. I believe that the continuance will probably not hinder anybody one bit. I believe that we will go on with our lives whether he's guilty, whether he's innocent, or whether there's a technicality. Because by this point, I believe that part of the strategy as well is to, if you do believe that he's guilty, that, the sting has had a little time to heal. So you don't have that instantaneous rage when you think of him possibly going in and killing 4 people in the middle of the night. You hear that, and you've heard it so much, and you've read about it, and you've listened to people talk about it. It's lost its effect. You've been desensitized to it. Just like everything else in life. The first school shooter we heard about, we were outraged. We were outraged. But by the 6th one, we're kind of like, oh, another one? Hell, here we are 30-something shootings later. It's just like another day. Oh, okay. How many kids died? Well, that's sad. I feel bad for their parents. And we continue on. I'm not getting political because I don't know enough about it to really opine about it. But, I am logical enough to think that people should be more invested in what's going on in their households rather than what's going on with Brian Kohberger. I've been impressed listening to the interviews with jury members in other big Idaho cases. Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow, for instance, they seem to take it very seriously. I'm 50 miles from Moscow. The only time I heard anyone discuss this case outside my own house was at a COV hearing. I mean, I ask people every day, people younger, 15, 16, 17 years old, and they're closest to the age of the victims when they died, right? Most of them don't have a clue who these people are. Most people do not have a clue. And to say that the mainstream media pushes this daily is a lie. Because I watch the big news agencies out there, and you don't hardly hear about Idaho anymore. There's other stories that are more catching than Idaho. There really is. Well, I don't know why they would speak like they did. I don't know if you're talking about me or if you're talking about other people, but I speak on what's in the documents and what I've heard out of people's mouths. So unless you assume that the documents are lying or that the people invested in the case, the attorneys or whatever, are lying, then, that's the only reason I could give you that I speak as if I know, because that's what they've said, But getting back to the jury, I hope that they finally start, getting a jury together, because it's time. It's time. It's time to get this case on the road. Yeah. Usually, if there's a hearing, there's a motion hearing, whatever, that's when they cover it. And then you get what? A couple minutes? And then you move on to the next. So to sit there and say that the media is fueling the ability to have an impartial, fair trial is a lie almost. The only people that really push this case daily is YouTube. I do. Other creators do. And we are really, do we really have that much of an influence? I mean, do we really have that much of an influence? Well, we know what the documents state, and those are factual. I mean, why would they be giving us documents with things that apparently happened if they weren't true? That's just my question. Yeah, short summary, then they move on to the next tragedy, of course. If there's a fire anywhere nearby, or if there's a plane crash or some kind of bombing or whatever, then that always gets front and center. The documents could come out today, and even the mainstream media or these other news agencies like News Nation, Court TV, these reporters that report on these things, they usually don't report on these documents until almost 3 or 4 days after the document drop. If that, maybe a week later. So it's really not that important to them to report in depth, probably 3 to 5 days later, where before it was around the clock. The owner of Linda Lane Camera told me we've never run across anyone in town that has been overly emotional or consumed with the murders. Honestly, not to sound callous, but no one ever talks about it anymore. So yeah, the argument from the defense attorney team seems overblown. Again, not much has been released about facts. Well, I'm interested in knowing what you believe factual information is in this case. What do you believe? Because there's a lot that's been released about this case. Whether you believe it's factual, that's another story. A couple weeks ago, there was a couple fires out of Lewiston. I heard about it through Facebook. The news didn't ever, yeah. There's cities that have homeless populations that have murders and all these other things going on in them that we don't hear about in the local news. There's a guy that I watch. I think his name is Valley Ray or something out of Portland. And the only reason I watched him is because he goes on a bike and he drives through Portland and he's telling you certain situations that are interesting. These types of homeless people are struggling with this. These type of people are struggling with that. And there's a guy here in Texas that is in Austin. And he drives around in his car and he reports on the Lady Bird Lake deaths. He reports on the news out of Austin on a daily basis every morning. And he's on YouTube. And it's interesting to listen to what he has to say because a lot of the stuff that he's talking about doesn't make the news like other things do. Dan, I'm posting a TikTok comment verifiable to unfurl 412 and a launcher speeding way. Key pieces, in my opinion. I am one to think versus believe. You sound like somebody else I know to make that statement. And he is very adamant about thinking versus believing. I hope this isn't your alter account, but I'm not paranoid like that. But I know an individual that harps on that all the time. Do you think or do you believe? Because if you believe, that means that you have the capability to understand that things can change. But if you think that's your biased opinion and things are going to be set in stone from then on out, quote unquote, troll games, I'm here, sorry, late, Greg. That's fine. That's fine. Nobody's obligated to be here the moment I start. I mean, people come in and out. You know what I mean? And this person is very adamant about those two words, thinking and believing. In his mind, there's so many billions of ignorant people in the world, and he believes that he is not one of them. So take it as you want. You know what I mean? Okay. Just saying. I'm not accusing you. I'm just saying that I know somebody that is strongly in belief of what you just typed. Either you listen to him, you've been near him when he speaks like that or something, because that is very direct on what he says. Too many read the documents instead of believing, think it must be a conspiracy. You know, what would cause the government to misinterpret themselves in a document? Honestly, what would they give? How am I insulting you if you don't even know who I'm talking about? Right? I'm not insulting you. See, that's your belief. I think that I'm just making total statements, not believing I'm insulting you at all. Your belief is that I'm insulting you, getting close to, and I'm not. You know, I talked to juveniles in that aspect as well, because, you know, anytime somebody raises their voice or somebody says something, people's perception instantly is that they're angry. And you have to dig a little deeper and ask, well, what does anger mean to you? And how do you know your justification of if somebody's angry or somebody just being stern? There's a lot of different ways to look at things, not just black or white. So just food for thought. And I'm speaking to everybody in the chat. You're not the only one in the chat. There's a lot more people in the chat. And there's going to be people replaying this as well. So don't feel insulted. Thank you for saying that, Leslie. But, you know, he either believes what he believes or he doesn't, you know. Who am I to challenge that perception, right? But you never answered my question, Joseph. What level of counseling do you do? Are you a licensed professional counselor? Are you a psychiatrist? Are you, you know, self-taught? What kind of counseling do you do? Do you do marital counseling? Do you do financial counseling? You know, any of that? Because I'm kind of curious. There's a lot of different counseling out there. We are believing, thinking, and feeling creatures. Of course we are. Without our own beliefs or our own thoughts, then it'd be kind of boring if we were just machine-like with no emotional attachment, right? So this case has created a lot of chaos. It really has. Stop telling you I believe. Okay. It seems you're getting a little upset. Can you just answer what I asked you? I mean, why is that so hard? You know, when it comes to this case, it's interesting to know that there's been a lot of distinctive areas where have led to dead ends. whether people have an understanding that it's a dead end or whether they continue to push that thought process to make others have an understanding that there's certain things that they understand isn't according to their understanding of the case. So to say that would mean like Linda Lane. Jeff just brought it up. Linda Lane. You know, Linda Lane has a lot of sounds and, laughing, coughing. Heck, you can even see smoke. And one thing I believe some people were saying that they saw somebody smoking or vaping under that camera at the very beginning. Well, I get that. But it seems like you get triggered very easily. You said I was getting close to insulting you, and you've yet to answer my question. You stated you were a counselor, or in the counseling that you do. I'm just kind of curious what kind of counseling it is. But since I'm close to insulting you, I will quit answering your chats. I will quit highlighting them. Don't want anybody to feel insulted or closely being insulted. Okay? I'm just going to speak up here and let you have your opinions. Well, I believe that Ann Taylor is doing all she can to get Brian off the death penalty. And she's using what she knows has worked in her line of work. And with that retrospect, by using what she knows works, she's hoping that it will be a continuum in her diligence to potentially not win or lose this case, but to get her defendant to a level that she can live with. I don't believe she's emotionally involved like a lot of people perceive. I don't believe that she's that emotionally involved. I don't believe that Massoff is emotionally involved. I mean, when you become a professional, your emotional involvement does not leak that deep. There is a thing in the counseling realm where, we talk about counter transference and transference. When you become that deeply involved, when somebody's triggering you like that, then you have to ask yourself, am I being objective at this point? And usually people aren't once they start to have deeper thoughts about that. Yeah, continuance. The defense filed a motion for a continuance in this case, and the state answered back with their own interpretation of what the continuance would do to the case. And I read that the other day, and one of the biggest things that it would possibly do to this case is have the family members have to wait even longer for justice, much less having the defendant to sit there and wait even more time to find out his fate. Okay. Oh, here we go. Anyways, it's getting close to my bedtime. I think I'm going to shut it down because I finished reading what I was going to read, and I'm just basically just taking up time right now. The thing she hasn't attempted in this case that she has done in others is getting the judge removed yet. That's interesting to know. And I thought that she would have done that at the very beginning when they appeared to not be getting along because, you know, they appeared to kind of clash from the jump whenever he told both sides that he was unwilling to play certain games and stuff like that. Um, I believe that at that point she would have directed some kind of plan to get him removed, just like what you said. So it's interesting that that hasn't happened yet. You know, at one point, whether you agree or not, I'm talking for myself, so I need to make sure that that people know that is, you know, this trial needs to go on. This trial needs to happen. This trial needs to happen not only for the defendant, but also for the people of Idaho, the people versus Brian Koberger, so that justice can prevail one way or the other. If the jury finds it that the man is innocent, then the man is innocent. If the jury finds that the individual is guilty, then the individual is guilty. Then, you know, in reality, we'll let the court do what they do. To be able to discuss these things in chats should be a logical existence of adults having conversation without arguments. I mean, especially if you don't have a horse in the race, you know, what would cause you to lose your composure and start calling names and stuff like that? I mean, it just, even if it's subtle, people aren't stupid. It's kind of like the YouTube murder that happened the other day in Las Vegas. These individuals lost their lives. This individual shot two people because they had been having an online feud. And he saw them. He saw them on the strip. And he pulled out a gun and shot the individual he had the confrontation with and his wife over something that is non-important as YouTube. You know? It's not important as YouTube. That's a good question. I don't know if she would or not. I don't know if she would or not. But if she would, that's interesting to think about. One would think. Hey, Patricia, thank you for being here. Nanya, thank you for being here. And Joseph, of course, thank you for being here. You know, no matter what you believe, I wasn't trying to insult anyone in the chat tonight. Wasn't trying to cause any ambivalence where it led to violence or harmful words. You know, I do try to cause ambivalence because that is what I do for a living, and I guess it just comes out that way. But none is done in harm. Her previous case, she wanted a judge that was not up for election. You know, like I said about this case, hopefully it happens. Hopefully it goes on. Life will go on. I guess the last question that I have for you guys in the chat is, what will you do once the case is over? How will you go on with your life? Will you continue on with true crime? Or will you kind of like be uninterested because this case has captivated you this long? Will this be a letdown? Will it be a letdown for you and you will leave true crime alone? Or you will find another case? I'm just curious to know what your answer would be in that. True crime was around before Idaho 4. Good thought. See, I got into it at the last of the Gabby Petito, I guess, but I didn't have a channel until probably right as they arrested Brian. So that's when my channel started. So it won't affect my life at all. I don't live this case. Okay. I've always been interested in true crime, so I will continue to be interested in new cases. Move on to the next case. I may not watch as much, but probably still follow some cases. So, are you more interested in those true crime cases that have a lot of interwebbed unknown, or are you interested in certain aspects of true crime? I mean, what kind of gets you hooked with true crime? I follow everything everywhere. Okay. Is it the aspect of the true crime, or is it the content, the not knowing? Is it the mystery? I like mysteries where my minds come together to discuss, where many minds come together to discuss. Maybe that's why it's like the game of Clue. True crime has stuck with me. I started with Gabby and I'm totally hooked. Wasn't Gabby Petito an interesting case, but it was like, I don't know. I would watch a little bit, I'd hear a little bit, and then be like, okay, this is wild. I think the part where really kind of the part that really got me was the part where people were saying that Brian was under his parents' yard and they were feeding him through a hole or something like that. I heard that and I was like, is that true? Is that true? And I had to keep watching. Like, I don't even know if I heard that on a newscast or if I heard it on a podcast. I don't even know where I heard it, but I heard it. And I was like, if that's really true, then that's wild that they're even thinking that. Because to me, I would think that would be the obvious place. You know, if people are talking about that, why wouldn't the police be looking there? You know what I mean? And then they were saying that the parents killed him. Why would they kill their own son? I started because of Idaho Force, followed Delphi, Daybells, Stearns, Adelson, and Richens. What do you mean? I am going to keep going. I follow different cases all the time, not just Idaho. I did Travis Decker the other day. I mean, there's a lot of interesting cases out there right now. His case has a lot to do with the mental aspect of his psyche, I believe. You know, it's like, was it really mental health or was it just premeditated, you know? I was very emotional during that case, but it could have been prevented. I know everyone makes mistakes, but those officers' mistake cost Gabby her life. Are you talking about whenever they pulled them over and they didn't intervene at that point? I thought they took her and then he went and picked her up or whatever. Yeah, I've heard he's still on the run. They're kind of closing in on him, but I hear he's still on the run. So hopefully they find him. Hopefully, you know, I think there's been a new sighting of him. So he's still alive if that sighting is true. So he's still running. I think I was watching a documentary on Gabby Petito, back to that case, where her parents said that they got the van back, but they had to have it dismantled because they didn't want the memory or people coming and trying to get a piece of the van to have a piece of the case. You know what I mean? So I thought that was very interesting. they said the only thing they really kept was the license plate, I believe they were saying. Common sense is hard to come by these days. Yes, it is. But is that not interesting that you would be so worried that people would come and take pieces off a van just for keepsakes, that you have to have the whole thing dismantled so that you would have to deal with that? I mean, sometimes it becomes really obsessive for some people. There's death threat, there's stalking, there's all kinds of stuff when people don't agree with what your stance is on certain things. I hope whoever's tracking knows what Decker knows. Yeah. Sounds like 11:22. Yeah, I mean, it's like you got to destroy it. Otherwise, people are going to be looking to get a piece of history, even though there for a little while we were tearing down statues because it represented a part of history we didn't like. So we're very picky on what we believe is acceptable and what's not. Isn't that why they buried the debris from the Idaho case? Yeah, I believe that's why. Because I think that they were saying that at first they were saying, these were reports that people were urinating in the back of the residence. College kids were urinating back there or whatever. And then I believe that their explanation was that they tore it down because of that pretense or whatever. Well, I'm going to call it a night, guys. It's been 2 hours already. I hope you enjoyed the live stream. I will be back tomorrow with a special guest probably. And we will be discussing a little more Idaho. She had been on the podcast before, so hopefully y'all will enjoy her again. We're planning to start at 8 p.m. Central, if that's good for her. If not, be looking at that timeline between 7 p.m. Central and 9 p.m. Central, somewhere around there. So make sure that y'all have your notifications set in place. Please hit the like button if you haven't already, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I hope that y'all have a wonderful night. And try not to sweat the small stuff, because after all, it's all small, right? Maestro, cue that music.